An Apache man saved the very one who took his wife's life right in the heart of a snowstorm. He never knew that letting go of hate just once would trap him in a storm far darker than the one outside. That night, the tragedy began. If this story moved, you don't forget to drop your thoughts in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and keep listening, because the truth only gets deeper from here. The wind had teeth that night, biting clean through buckskin and bone. It came howling off the white mountains like an old grudge, dragging needles of ice across the sky and shaking the trees down to their roots. Snow was falling so thick it made the world look half erased, like it couldn't decide whether to stay or disappear. Akin wrapped the fresh-cut venison in hide and slung it over his back. He had tracked the buck since before daylight and brought it down clean with one arrow just below the shoulder. A good kill, one that would keep his daughter fed for days. But the storm had come in fast and hard, the kind of storm that turned men foolish if they didn't listen close to the sky. He tugged his fur-lined hood tighter and began the descent, back home boots cutting into drifts waist-high. The snow blurred the trail, but he didn't need eyes for that. He'd walked these woods since he was a boy, since before the iron rails came clawing through the valleys, before men in wool coats and hollow promises brought bullets wrapped in gold. Nayeli would be waiting, fire burning low, her little hands working pine needles into bundles like her mother used to show her. The thought turned something heavy in his chest. Her mother. Dead 3 winters now. Shot by a settler whose fence line wandered too far and whose nerves were thinner than bark. She'd gone looking for herbs just past the river bend. Never came back. They found her 2 days later, stiff and twisted, mouth open like she still had words left. The sheriff called it an accident. Said it like that made it lighter. Akin had carried her body home in silence, buried her with his own hands under a cedar tree. He hadn't spoken to a white man since, so when he saw the wagon broken and tipped on its side in a snowbank, he damn near turned and walked the other way. It sat crooked just off the ridge, one wheel snapped clean canvas shredded by wind. Horses gone, probably scattered from the wreck. A mess of trunks, papers, a torn valise spilling dresses into the snow. But it was the shape near the front wheel that stopped him. Half buried. Still. He didn't move at first, just stood, breath curling in the air. His jaw set tight. Every muscle said, "Leave her." Every ghost in his memory whispered, "Let her freeze." But he stepped forward anyway. The woman was young, maybe, pale as birch bark. Her hair, what hadn't matted to her face, was yellow like wheat at the edge of autumn. Lips blue, blood at her hairline frozen stiff. Her dress was satin, not built for cold, not built for this place. She'd curled in on herself like a fawn caught out of season. He knelt, pressed fingers to her neck. A beat. Slow, but there. Akin looked out across the snow. No signs of others. No prints but his. If she stayed here, she'd die before the next moon rose. The snow would take her quiet. And maybe that would be justice. Maybe the earth was just setting things back where they belonged. His fingers tightened around the edge of his coat. She was dying, that much was clear. The cold was already moving in slow and certain like wolves when the fire goes out. She had maybe an hour, 2 if the wind took pity, which it wouldn't. And then she moved, just barely. One eye cracked open, a slit of blue beneath lashes laced in frost. Her mouth parted, soundless. A breath caught in her throat. Her gaze found him not clear, not pleading in any words he could understand, but in that moment something passed between them. Akin's breath locked in his chest. His boot shifted in the snow. He should have left her. 3 winters back, he might have. He remembered the blood on the ground, the way his wife's braid had unraveled in the mud, the soldier's laugh after, the sheriff's shrug, the sound of a door closing behind him that never truly opened again. This woman could be daughter to one of them, sister, fiancé. It didn't matter. It should have been reason enough to walk. His hands opened-closed. He looked down at her again. The wind hit harder, like it had caught him hesitating and was trying to decide for him. She shivered, one weak tremor that barely stirred her limbs. Still looking at him. Still alive. Akin let out a long breath, slow and deep, like letting go of something he didn't name. He knelt, unrolled the thick pelt of wolfskin, wrapped it tight around her shoulders. She barely reacted. Just a small sound escaped her lips, too dry to be a word. He slipped one arm beneath her back, the other under her knees, lifted her as gentle as he could, though her limbs were stiff and awkward. The weight of her was strange, not heavy, but present, like holding a secret that didn't want to be kept. For a moment, he just stood there. The sky darkened around them, snow falling like ash from some quiet war. Then Akin braced her weight against his chest and turned toward the trees, toward the trail he knew blind, toward the only home he had left. He trudged forward slow as the wind would let him. By the time he reached the cabin, the sky had turned near black wind, shrieking like it had something to prove. The door stuck from ice, but he shoved it open with his shoulder boots thudding heavy against the planked floor. Nayeli ran from her cot, eyes wide. "Papa, get the stones near the fire. Quick." She obeyed without a word, fetching warm rocks wrapped in cloth from their place near the hearth. Akin laid the woman on a straw mat behind the stove, shielded from drafts. Her skin was like cold clay. "Who is she?" Nayeli asked, voice soft. "A stranger," he said. He unwrapped the pelt, stripped off her wet gloves, tugged off the boots, stiff with frost. "Bring the red jar. The roots." Nayeli handed him the old tin with the crushed cedar and boiled pine needles. He added a few drops of water, held it near the coals, watched it steam. As he worked, his daughter knelt beside the woman. Her eyes, the color of polished obsidian, studied the stranger's face. She from the town Akin didn't answer. After he'd trickled the brew into the woman's mouth, drop by drop, he sat back on his heels and exhaled slow. The warmth of the fire pressed against his face, but the storm still screamed outside like it wasn't finished. Nayeli tugged on his sleeve. "Why'd you help her?" He didn't look at her at first. He stared at the flicker of firelight on the cabin walls, the old hanging bundles of herbs, the faded beaded pouch his wife once carried, now tucked near the ceiling. "'Cause she was dying. But she's from the West," Nayeli said, "where they burn trees, where men bring guns on wagons, like the ones who—" She stopped herself, but her mouth stayed tight. Akin looked up from where he was tending the fire. The flicker of it danced in his eyes, lighting the lines carved into his face by wind and loss. Nayeli's voice dropped to a whisper. "What if grandfather finds out?" The words hung there like frost in the air. She was trembling now, not from cold, but from something deeper. Her little hands pulled tight around the fringe of her blanket, and she stepped closer to the wall like somehow that would keep her safe from things not yet here. If he sees her here, she swallowed, he'll say it's betrayal. He'll say she's one of them, the kind who shot Mama. Her voice cracked on the last word. It was the first time she'd spoken it in months. Akin didn't answer right away. His hands stilled on the pot. For a moment he just stared into the flames. Then he rose to his full height, not towering but solid. The weight of memory pulled his shoulders back, and his voice came low, quiet. "I know." He looked down at her small, sharp face so much like her mother's, and eyes too old for her age. "I know what she might be. I know what your grandfather would say, what the others would do." He knelt beside her, voice tighter now. "I ain't forgot what happened by the river. I remember the sound her body made when I lifted her from the mud. I remember every word they didn't say when we buried her under cedar." Nayeli blinked fast, face scrunching like she wanted to be angry, but couldn't figure out who to aim it at. "Then why?" she whispered. "Why did you bring her here?" Because Akin said, looking not at the girl but at the woman sleeping by the fire, she was alone. He let the words settle. She wasn't shooting. She wasn't shouting. She was just cold, hurt, and alone, like anyone might be. Like your mother once was before I found her near the same trail. You remember that story? Nayeli nodded, slow, still not speaking. Akin sat beside her. The fire hissed behind them, wood cracking down the middle. It was the morning of the third day when Claire woke. Her eyes blinked open. The ceiling above her was wooden, uneven, with dark stains from smoke. The air in the room was heavy, thick with unfamiliar smells, smoke, dirt, meat. There were no walls of plaster, no velvet curtains, no clink of porcelain or smell of coal oil lamps. Instead, silence. A fire, and something hanging above her feathers and bones, strung with colored thread, swaying slightly like they were alive. She sat bolt upright. The weight of fear fell on her chest hard and fast. She looked around. A log room, pelts and blankets, carved wooden masks, the unmistakable scent of something wild. Her voice broke out sharp and hoarse. What is this?" A rush of footsteps. The man, the dark one with the leather coat and the long black braid, was already beside her, hand clamped over her mouth before the second scream left her throat. He held her still with the other arm, not cruel but firm, eyes locked to hers. His voice low but tight, a whisper through clenched teeth. "Don't yell. Quiet." She struggled weakly at first, then harder. Her eyes flared wide, the panic of the unknown ripping through her like fire. She kicked against the blankets, twisted, grunted behind his hand. But she was too weak, and he didn't let go. He held her a few seconds more, waiting until the wildness in her face started to dim just a little. "Quiet," he said again. "You're safe, but not if you scream." She stilled, not from trust, but because she had no choice. He let go slow. Claire pulled away, coughing into her sleeve, trembling hard. She backed against the log wall like it might swallow her. You're one of them," she said, voice cracking. "You're Apache. You're one of them," she said, voice cracking. "You're Apache." Her body pressed back against the log wall hard. Her breath came short and sharp, shoulders tensed like a rabbit about to bolt. The hides around her fell away, and her hands, though shaking, clawed at the floor for something, anything to shield herself with. Eyes wide, she looked at him, not like a man, but like something that might strike. Akin didn't move. He stood where he was, boots planted firm, arms loose at his sides. She shrank more, pulling the blanket tight to her chest. "Please," she whispered. "Don't." He raised both hands slowly, palms out. "No hurt," he said. The words came rough-shaped from a tongue not meant for them. You safe. She blinked, stunned still by the sound of his voice in her language. Akin pointed to himself. Akin. I... help. Not bad. He paused, searching for the right way to reach her. No. No kill. No tie. His fingers made the motions, hands crossed, then spread apart, showing her she was free. He took one step back, giving her space, letting her see he carried no blade, no rope, no threat. Claire's chest heaved. Her knuckles had gone white on the edge of the blanket. A long silence sat between them. She looked around again. At the room, the fire, the child peeking in from the doorway. Her lips parted, fear turning sharp. I shouldn't be here, she said. My father, he said. He cut her off with a motion of his hand. Not rough, just tired. Don't say nothing more. Just breathe. I want to leave. You can't walk. You'll die out there. She stared at him. Then take me. I saved you. That's all. She fell silent. Her shoulders sagged. In the doorway, Nayeli crossed her arms tight over her chest, eyes narrowed at the stranger in their home. She didn't say a word, but her look said plenty. The day passed slow. Claire didn't speak much. She kept to her corner, huddled under hides, only rising when nature demanded. Her leg was bruised from the fall, her ankle swollen and purple. Every movement made her hiss. But she watched, always watched. Watched as Akin skinned a rabbit in the yard and boiled the bones inside. Watched him sort herbs into small clay jars, muttering the names under his breath. Watched the little girl Nayeli, who refused to answer her questions or come near, always slipping out of the room when Claire tried to talk. That night, Claire curled near the fire with her back to the room, unable to sleep. The fire danced on the ceiling. Her thoughts spun. She remembered the wagon tipping, the horses screaming, the cold. She remembered stories, warnings. Her father's voice firm over the dinner table in London Savages, every one of them. You'll stay clear of them out there. No treaties, no trust. Now she lay under the roof of one. And he hadn't killed her. He hadn't even spoken harsh. She didn't know what to make of that. In the early dark, just before dawn, Akin moved through the cabin quiet. He checked the fire, covered the window gaps with fresh cloth. The storm outside had eased, but the danger hadn't. His father, the chief, had scouts in the woods. Any tracks, any rumors of a white woman being kept alive under his own son's roof would bring questions no answer could satisfy. He had already lied once. Told them he'd heard gunshots near the valley ridge, but saw only crows. It bought him time. He turned to look at Claire, asleep again, now mouth slack with exhaustion. She looked younger in sleep, less frightened, almost familiar in a way he couldn't place. He glanced at Nayeli, who had curled up far from the stranger, her little body balled under the deer-hide blanket her mother had stitched with bone needle. He whispered to her before sleep, told her to tell no one, not grandfather, not the women at the well. Nayeli had nodded, but her eyes had looked like stone. By the fourth day, Claire sat up on her own. She moved around the cabin, slow, wincing with each step. She tried to help, though Nayeli still gave her the cold shoulder. When Claire offered to stir the stew, Nayeli grabbed the spoon from her hand. You'll burn it. No, I won't. You don't know nothing about food. Claire blinked, then stepped back. I'm just trying to help. I didn't ask for it, Nayeli said flat. Later that day, Akeen found Claire sitting outside on a log, sunlight catching in her pale hair. She was peeling roots with a dull blade and wincing at every knot. "Your girl hates me," she muttered, not looking up. "She don't hate you," he said. "She just misses what we lost." Claire looked up at that, meeting his eyes. Something about the way he said it made her chest tighten. That night, Claire stayed near the fire again. This time, she cooked. Real cooking, not just heating broth, but slicing turnip roasting rabbit with wild onions sprinkling in herbs she'd watched Akeen use. Nayeli walked in while it simmered. The smell filled the cabin, warm, sweet, rich, in a way they hadn't tasted since before the snow. She sniffed. Didn't say a word. Claire dished her a bowl, handed it over slow. The girl took it suspicious. She tasted, paused, then ate every bite without complaint. The next evening, while Akeen carved arrows, Claire leaned close to Nayeli and offered her a clean ribbon she'd pulled from the lining of her ruined coat, red silk, crumpled but untorn. "For your hair," she said gently. "It's not much, but I thought maybe." Nayeli looked at it for a long time, didn't take it, didn't refuse. She just said quiet Mama had a red ribbon. Claire's smile faltered. Her eyes went soft. I bet it looked beautiful on her. Nayeli turned, climbed up onto the bedroll, curled into the corner, but she kept the ribbon. By the 6th day, Claire's leg had started to mend. The swelling eased up and she could bear weight again, slow and careful. The bruises around her ribs faded from deep purple to yellow-brown. She still ached when she reached too far or stood too long, but the pain didn't own her like it had. Each morning, Akeen brought her a basin of heated water, and she'd clean the wounds herself. He didn't offer to help, didn't ask if she needed it, just left the water and stepped away. Somehow, that felt like more respect than fussing ever could. Nayeli still kept her distance. She wasn't cold like before, not exactly, but cautious like a rabbit that had once been caught and hadn't forgotten the trap. Still, she watched. Always watched. And sometimes when Claire cooked, the girl would drift close, sniffing the pot and pretending she wasn't interested. That afternoon, Claire handed her a slice of roasted squash without a word. Nayeli took it, nodded once, and walked off chewing. It wasn't much, but it was something. The morning after, Akeen stood at the door holding his bow and a small satchel. Snow had melted down enough for travel. He looked at Claire without saying anything at first, then nodded toward the trees. "You walk now," he said, his English thick but clear. "Come." Claire blinked. "Me?" He nodded once. She glanced at Nayeli, who was slipping on her own boots. The girl grinned just a little, like she was in on something secret. Claire pulled on her coat. They didn't speak as they walked. The snow crunched underfoot, soft in spots, iced in others. The trail wound narrow between rows of pine and aspen, the light coming down through bare branches like slivers of old glass. Akeen led, moving silent as a shadow, while Nayeli followed close behind. Claire trailed after them, slower, unsure but keeping pace. She hadn't been in a forest like this before. Not truly. She'd ridden past trees on horses, picnicked on trimmed lawns near watered groves, even visited her uncle's estate that bordered a hunting preserve. But this wasn't trimmed or civilized. It breathed. It watched. At one point, she paused beside a tree with bark peeled away on one side. She reached out, touched the rough surface. Akeen glanced back, saw her hand there. "Elk rub," he said. "Young bull. This high." He raised his hand to his shoulder. Claire smiled, faintly surprised. "You can tell that?" He didn't answer, just kept walking. After another hour, they stopped near a stream still half frozen, trickling slow over polished rocks. Akin, crouched low, pressed his palm to the ground. Claire watched him, fascinated by how his whole body seemed to listen. Not his ears, his body. Like the wind told him things, like the forest was whispering only to him. He pointed to a bent patch of grass. "Deer," he said. "2, maybe 3. One small. Morning tracks." He motioned to Claire. "Look. Step here. Not there." She tried mimicking his movements. She didn't get it right, not fully. Her boot slipped once, sent a pebble skittering. Akin winced. "You too loud," he said. Claire laughed under her breath. "I'll work on it." Nayeli chuckled behind her. Claire turned and caught it, the sound pure brief, like something small breaking open inside her. Later, they settled under a cluster of spruce trees. Akin pulled dried meat from his satchel, handed some to each of them. Nayeli sat cross-legged on a mossy patch, chewing quietly. Claire sat beside her, watching a hawk circle far overhead. "She-e," Nayeli said suddenly. Claire turned to her. "What?" "Shai-e," the girl repeated. "Means wind." Claire nodded. "Wind," she said slowly. Then she pointed to the bird above. "And that?" Nayeli smiled a little. "Da-ite." Claire repeated the words, careful. Akin watched them both, saying nothing, but his eyes were softer than before. Over the next days, the walks became routine. Not every day, sometimes the snow was too thick. Sometimes Akin had business elsewhere, but often enough. Claire learned more than words. She learned the way silence could stretch between people without turning cold. She learned how to read broken twigs, how to feel the difference in air before a storm, how to keep her feet light and her breathing lighter. And she listened, really listened, not to voices, but to the sounds that weren't spoken, the snap of a branch, the hum of wind through hollow trunks, the stillness before something stirred. One morning, crouched beside a fox burrow, Akin looked at her and said, "Now you hear?" Claire didn't answer, but she did. That night, after Nayeli had gone to bed, Akin and Claire sat by the fire. They didn't plan to talk. It just happened. Claire poked at the flames, her fingers fiddling with a charred stick. "I was taught, where I'm from, that your people were dangerous." Akin didn't react. "My father always said, never turn your back on a red man. He said you couldn't be trusted, that you'd kill a woman as fast as a man, that you didn't believe in God or decency or peace." She looked at him, her eyes steady. "I believed him." He nodded once, waited. "And now," she shook her head, "I see a man who carried me from the snow, a man who kept me alive without asking who I was, who feeds his daughter first, who watches the trees like they speak to him. I don't know what to believe anymore." Akin took a long breath, then said, "We learn what we're told, then we learn what's true." She looked at him. The firelight made his skin glow, red gold shadows moving slow across his cheekbones. "What about you?" she asked. "What were you told about us?" He didn't speak for a long time. Then softly, "That your people take land, take names, take breath from those who don't bow." "And what do you believe now?" He stirred the fire. "Not sure yet." He told her about his wife that night. He didn't mean to, but the words came anyway. She went to gather roots. Not far. River bend. Didn't come back. Claire didn't interrupt. They said she crossed the line. Line no one marked. White men shot her. Thought she was sneaking. Didn't check if she was armed. He looked into the flames like they owed him something. I found her. Still breathing. Just barely. Took her home. She died before morning. Silence followed. Claire reached out, laid her hand over his. Just for a second. It was the only thing she had. The wind picked up outside again, but this time it didn't sound angry. Just restless. Like it was waiting. In the town, the parlor of the Whitmore residence stood still in the late morning sun, every surface polished like it expected judgment. High-backed chairs sat stiff around a long oak table untouched. A kettle hissed in the far corner, but no one moved to pour. Thomas Whitmore paced in front of the window, one hand clenching the edge of a telegram, the other tapping against his cane in restless beats. His face, though still neat and shaved, had the dull red hue of someone whose blood hadn't cooled in days. The wax seal on the telegram lay broken on the sideboard like a torn oath. Nothing, he muttered. 2 weeks, and not a single God-forsaken word. The sheriff, a round man with tired boots and a mustache too big for his mouth, cleared his throat gently. We sent riders, Mr. Whitmore, far as Eagle Rock and south toward Reservation Ridge. If she's out there... Thomas spun. You think she ran off on her own? That what you're telling me, Hal? I didn't say that. My daughter doesn't vanish, Sheriff. She doesn't slip into thin air without help. You know what's out there, savages the whole damn ridge crawling with them. And nobody lifts a finger. We ain't got proof they took her. Thomas walked closer, voice dropping. No. Then who did? The wind. The sheriff scratched his neck, looked down at his boots. Look, you want scouts? I'll authorize it. Quiet like. You'll have to pay 'em. Done. Thomas stepped back toward the window. I want men in the woods by sunup. I want her found. The days had grown longer, but the shadows lingered longer too. The sun rose slower now, creeping up behind the ridge like it had to think twice about showing its face. And at night, even when the wind died down, something else had started hanging in the air, heavier than snow, colder than silence. Claire felt it. So did Akeen. Their steps had grown closer, their words fewer. She cooked more now, using roots and dried meats she'd learned to boil just right. And she'd watch as he ate quiet but steady, like he wasn't just chewing food, but trying to taste something he hadn't felt in a long time. They didn't speak much of what was happening between them, but it was there in the way his hand brushed hers when they passed a bowl, in the way she lingered near the fire longer, even when sleep tugged at her. And Nayeli, well, she saw it too. Children notice those things, even if they don't say 'em out loud. But while warmth was building in the cabin, trouble was brewing outside it. One morning, Akeen was called to the council fire. The tribe had gathered. Men, mostly hunters, guards, elders with their long gray braids and sharp sun-split faces. They sat on logs and stumps, circled tight around the fire pit at the center of the village. Smoke drifted up into the cold sky, mixing with pine ash and the smell of old leather. Akeen stood near the back, arms crossed, his face still. His father, the chief, sat at the head, wrapped in a bison robe, staff planted in the ground beside him. His voice was rough, the kind that scraped even when it spoke calm. "There's white men in the woods," he said. "They're hunting something. Or someone." Tracks found near the river bend. Boot prints. Cigarette ash. Fresh. A low rumble passed through the group. They come close, the chief continued, too close. Maybe they looking for something they lost. Or maybe they just want war. Akeen's chest pulled tight. Claire. The old man scanned the circle. I say this now. No more warnings. No more letting them pass. We find anyone we kill. No exceptions. Murmurs turned into growls. The younger men, those with restless blood and short memories, nodded. Some raised fists. Some beat their chests. Kill them all, one shouted. They would do the same. They already did. Another barked. They took my brother's scalp. Akeen opened his mouth to speak, but stopped. The fire cracked loud as if warning him. His father's eyes found him. You got something to say? Boy. Akeen swallowed. His jaw moved, but no words came. All around him, the voices rose louder, angrier. His silence became agreement whether he liked it or not. He shook his head. No, father. The chief stared long, then looked away. Good. That night, Akeen sat at the edge of the bedroll, rubbing his hands like he was trying to clean off something that wasn't dirt. Claire was slicing dried venison in the corner, eyes watching him without asking. He didn't tell her what was said at the council. He didn't have to. She already knew something had shifted. He went out for wood near sundown. The wind had picked up, bringing the scent of cold smoke and sap. When he came back, the door to the cabin was already half open, and standing there inside his home was his father. The old man's face was stone eyes, sharp lips curled like he'd just stepped in filth. Claire stood frozen near the stove, a spoon in her hand, her face pale. Nayeli was behind her, halfway behind a pile of blankets. What? Is this the chief? Said low, like thunder rumbling from the mountain. Akeen dropped the firewood with a thud. Father, listen. You bring one of them here, he roared, taking 2 steps forward. You feed her. Let her sleep under your roof. Claire backed up, bumping into the wall, shaking. She was hurt, Akeen said, standing between them now. She was gonna die. I gave you your own land, your own roof, because I thought you still had pride. I thought you remembered your mother, your wife. I do. You dishonor them. Akeen's fists clenched. She's not like them. The chief laughed, bitter and hollow. They all alike. They lie. They kill. They steal. You think this one different 'cause she cooks rabbit and smiles at your daughter? Claire spoke, trembling. I never meant... Shut your mouth, the old man snapped. Akeen moved fast, put a hand up. Don't talk to her like that. The men outside had started to gather. Your wife, your child's mother died in yours, the chief growled. And now you bring the same blood into this place. You shame me. He shoved Akeen hard enough to stagger him. Claire gasped. Nayeli cried out. Akeen stepped forward again. You'll have to go through me. The door burst open. 2 young braves entered, weapons drawn. They grabbed Akeen from behind, pulling him back. Wait, he shouted. Don't touch her! Claire screamed as one of them pushed her aside and dragged her toward the door. Don't hurt her. She's to be judged, the chief said coldly. She'll face the fire. Akeen thrashed, tried to fight, but the weight of the 2 men pinned him. His father raised a hand. Lock him up. They dragged Akeen out through snow and smoke, past the stairs of his own people, past the firelight, into the dark. The holding pit was barely more than a dugout with a timber lid and old chains, cold as stone, damp, the kind of place that quieted men quick. They shoved Akeen in and bolted the hatch. He shouted, loud, over and over. He pounded the walls until his knuckles bled. He cursed. The men cursed his father, cursed himself. He begged too, switched tongues from Apache to English and back again. No one answered. Silence came heavy after a while. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that sank in slow and settled in your chest. He sat there, shaking the chill, finding every part of him that wasn't moving. He thought about Claire, thought about her hands, her voice, her face that first day in the snow, the way she flinched when she saw him, the way she smiled when Nayeli handed her that wooden fox. He pressed his head to the wall and cursed again, but quieter. His heart ached something awful. He'd tried to do what was right, but now everything felt wrong. It was hours later, maybe more, when the bolt creaked. At first, he didn't believe it. Then he heard the whisper, "Papa." He turned his head. The door slid open just enough for a shape to slip through. Small, fast. Nayeli. She held a wooden key she'd carved from an old spoon. The chain had been cut, not clean, but enough. "I told the guards you were gone. I threw a stone past the horses. They ran off." He stared at her, stunned. "You did all that. I ain't letting them kill her." Akin pulled her into a hug, held her tight. "You brave little one." She pulled back. "We have to go. Now." They moved fast under cover of night. Claire was being held in the old prayer lodge near the fire circle. A trial by dawn, a burning at sunrise. But not if Akin got there first. Snow started to fall again, soft and steady, the kind that made no sound but filled every footprint behind you. The night held its breath once more, and Akin was ready to run against it. The fire cracked in the center of the circle, casting red light across tense faces and clenched hands. Claire stood in the middle of it all. Her hands were bound behind her back, shoulders drooping from fatigue, but her eyes scanned the crowd like someone searching for a way through fog. Her breath came short and fast, her heart pounding like a drum inside an empty cave. She wanted to speak, but her throat was dry as dust. They were staring at her like she didn't belong to any world, certainly not theirs. Not human, just wrong. Then the chief stepped forward. He wore a cloak of animal fur that dragged behind him, and in his hand was the ceremonial knife curved long as a man's hand with a handle wrapped in rawhide. The blade caught the firelight, gleaming red like it had drawn blood before, and remembered it. He didn't speak at first, just looked at Claire. For a long time. And in those eyes, Claire saw fire, but not the kind dancing in the pit. The kind born of graves of buried names and old sorrow. Then his voice came rough and cold. "This woman comes from the blood that took ours. She stepped on sacred ground without permission. She bears the face of those who shot my daughter, my wife, my kin. The law is clear, trespassers die by flame." Claire trembled. The air turned heavy. Heat licked her cheeks. She turned her head, searching, looking for Akin, for Nayeli, anyone. But there was no one familiar. Her breath grew shallow, eyes wide. She took half a step back, then jerked as the rope bit tighter. She stumbled, fell to her knees. A young man approached with a burning torch. Claire gasped. Her body shook. She tried to back away, but her legs gave out. Her mind screamed, "Say something. Scream, plead." But nothing came out. Just as the flame came close, a voice tore through the fire and the crowd. "Stop!" Akin burst through the circle like a storm. He shoved aside two warriors with quick, powerful strikes, grabbed a spear from one and flung it to the snow. He dropped to his knees in front of Claire, arms spread wide, shielding her with his body. The fire behind him lit his back, his hair, his shoulders. He panted hard, eyes locked on his father. "Father, stop this!" he shouted. "Don't let this fire spill innocent blood. Don't burn what you don't understand." The chief stepped forward, fury seething in his stare. "You would defy your people's law." "I'm not defying the law," Akin said, breathless but steady. "I'm defying the hate. She is the same as the ones who stole from us, the same as the ones who shot your wife, left your mother to die in my arms. Have you forgotten I remember every drop of blood? I remember her last breath. But if we answer blood with blood, we're no better than they are. If we kill a woman who raised no weapon, who only bled from the cold, then the forest won't call us its children anymore." The fire snapped, but no one spoke. The wind picked up, rushing down from the ridge, carrying with it the scent of pine and ash and something older. The chief took another step. "Stand aside." Akin didn't move. "If you kill her, then you'll have to kill me first." All eyes turned to Claire. She still trembled. She didn't understand every word, but she knew what Akin was doing. He was offering himself for her. Her lips parted. Her voice cracked but rose just loud enough to carry, "If you kill him, then you'll have to kill me too." The words came in broken Apache, but they were clear. The circle fell still. A white woman, speaking their tongue, facing death without flinching. The chief stood frozen, staring at the two of them. His son and a foreign woman bound together not by rope, but by something he didn't yet have words for. Behind them, Nayeli peeked from the shadows, eyes wide with both fear and something like hope. The old man breathed out slow. The sky cracked open with thunder, not the kind that brought rain, not the kind that passed quiet and left nothing behind. This one came with boots and metal and the sharp bark of shouted orders. Hooves hit the frozen ground like war drums, and rifles gleamed at every hip. Thomas Whitmore arrived with men behind him and steel in his voice. They didn't knock. They came over the ridge like they owned the land, brushing past pine trees and prayer stones like none of it meant a damn thing. Claire was still recovering. Her color had returned little by little. Her strength, too, though she still winced when she stood. The scar on her ankle would stay. The bruises had faded and her voice had gotten steady again, except when she dreamed. But she'd been kept apart. Not by chains, not by orders, but by the silence of a people who hadn't forgiven. A tent was set for her at the far edge of camp. Food was left outside. Children kept their distance. Women whispered behind hands. Claire spent her nights writing in charcoal on strips of tanned hide, not because she thought anyone would read it, but because putting words down was the only thing that made her feel real. And then, one quiet morning, just as the sun was cracking past the tree line, everything blew open. Thomas Whitmore's coat was trimmed in gold and dusted with travel. He sat atop a tall gray stallion looking down on the camp like it was a thing to be bought or bombed depending on the mood. His men fanned out behind him, rifles shouldered but eyes hot. He dismounted like a man used to being obeyed. "Where is she?" he barked. The people gathered, quiet, watching. Tension rose in the air like smoke before fire. The chief stepped out from his lodge, staff in hand. "This land is not yours to storm," he said. "Your voice carries no weight here." "I didn't come to talk about land," Whitmore snapped. "I came for my daughter." "She's alive," the chief said, "and free. She stays by her will." "She was taken," he barked, "held here like some savage's pet." The chief's face went still. Claire had heard the noise from her tent and stepped out just as the insult landed. "I came on my own," she said, voice cutting through the tension. Her father turned at the sound and something in him cracked. Claire! His boots crunched snow as he rushed to her. She stepped back. No, she said, hands raised. Please, stop. She's not well, he said, facing the chief now. Look at her thin, shaking. God knows what you people have done. A hand went to a pistol. It was a lieutenant behind Whitmore. Young, jittery. Everything happened in a blink. The gunshot rang out, cracking across the trees. The chief flinched, but it wasn't his blood that hit the snow. It was Claire's. She had moved without thinking, thrown herself forward just as the pistol fired. The bullet took her high in the shoulder, spun her sideways, dropped her like a sack of wheat. She hit the ground hard, blood blooming across the fur coat like spilled paint. Time shattered. Akin broke through the crowd like fire through dry brush. He caught her in his arms before she touched cold again. Claire. Her eyes fluttered, mouth open in a gasp that barely came out. I'm not one of them, she whispered in Apache. Then she passed out. The camp exploded, shouting, guns drawn, knives unsheathed. But something stopped the blood. It was the chief. He stood tall despite the shaking in his knees and raised both arms. Stop, he said. Nobody moves. The warriors froze. The old man looked down at Claire in Akin's arms, then looked up at Whitmore. You have brought death to my door, he said. I didn't mean. You meant to own, and now your child lies bleeding. Whitmore tried to step forward. Akin stood up still, cradling Claire, face wild with pain. You take her now, he growled. She'd die. His English was broken, strained. You see blood. Cold. She lose too much. She needs a doctor, Whitmore insisted. She need quiet. Fire. Herb. Touch of healer. You're not a doctor. She live here. She breathe here. Now she almost die. Here. Whitmore hesitated. Behind him, his men had gone quiet. The chief stepped beside Akin, laid a hand on his shoulder. Take her, he said. Go to the healer. I will hold the line. His voice was soft, but strong. I will handle the white men. Akin looked at him. No more words passed. He understood. He ran. The healer's lodge sat at the far edge of the camp, half buried in snow with smoke drifting thin from the roof. Inside the room was warm, dim, and quiet. The healer, a woman older than the hills, blind in one eye, said nothing when Akin burst in. She saw the blood, saw the way he held the girl, and simply pointed to the furs near the fire. Akin laid Claire down. Her face had gone pale, lips blue around the edges. She barely breathed. The healer went to work, pulled salves from bone jars, packed the wound with crushed moss and burnt bark, poured warm broth between Claire's lips, drop by drop. Akin sat nearby, frozen in place, his hands stained red. He didn't speak. Just watched her chest rise and fall, watched her fight to stay. Night fell. The chief returned to the camp gate, arms raised, his warriors behind him. Whitmore's men had their rifles up, but something in their eyes had changed. They'd seen what happened, seen the blood, seen the girl collapse protecting the man they'd called enemy. The chief didn't raise his staff. He didn't shout. He just said, "She chose. You didn't listen. This is the cost." Whitmore stared at him, broken. The pistol still hung from the lieutenant's hand, but the boy looked like he'd aged 10 years. "Take your men," the chief said, "and leave." No one moved. Then Whitmore nodded. And they did. Back in the healer's lodge, hours passed. The bleeding had slowed. The fever had not yet come. Claire's brow stayed slick and her hands twitched. Akin hadn't moved from her side. Nayeli sat nearby, quiet as snow, holding a bowl of broth she didn't try to feed. And then Claire stirred. Her lips moved. Akin. He leaned in. "I'm here." Her voice was faint, slurred. "I thought this might be it." "No," he said. "Not yet." She opened her eyes. Barely. "I can't stay. I need help. Real help." "Doctor." He swallowed hard. "I know." She reached up, brushed his jaw with the back of her hand. "Come with me." A pause. He took her hand in both of his. "Claire, please," she said. "Just for a while. To London. Just until I'm well." He looked away, out the smoke hole above, where stars blinked through the wind, then back to her. "You got ocean," he said. "I got mountain. I need you. I stay with stone, with wind, with roots too deep to pull." Tears welled in her eyes. Akin leaned close, held her, long, tight, then whispered, "You take part of me with you. That enough?" Claire stood on her own 2 feet again, not without pain and not without help, but she stood. Her shoulder was wrapped tight beneath a heavy coat lined in rabbit fur. The wound still pulled when she breathed too deep or moved too quick, but the healer said it would mend in time. What wouldn't mend, she wasn't sure. The sun was just starting its slow climb above the eastern ridge as Claire stepped out of the tent and into the thinning morning fog. 2 sides faced off across the open flat, Akin's people on one end, her father's men on the other. Rifles weren't drawn, but hands hadn't left their holsters. The horses snorted in the cold, stomping their hooves as if even they knew what tension felt like. She walked between them, legs shaking under her but straight-backed. Her father started toward her, arms out, but she stopped him with a single glance. "I'll go with you," she said. His mouth opened like he had more to say, but nothing came out. He just nodded slowly. Claire turned then, faced the other half of her heart. Akin stood still beside his daughter. Nayeli held her arms tight across her chest, jaw set the way Claire had seen her do when trying not to cry. Claire walked toward them. Each step felt like it pulled a root from the soil. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small leather cord. On it hung a tiny wooden eagle carved by her own hands, rough and uneven but shaped with care. The wings were stretched wide, tail dipped low as if the bird were gliding mid-air. "I started this the night after the snow melted," Claire said softly, kneeling in front of Nayeli. "Didn't know if I'd ever finish it. But I did." She reached out and tied it gently around the girl's neck. "I carved it for you. My hands still tremble a little, so he's not perfect. But he's strong." Nayeli didn't speak. She just stared at the carving for a long moment, fingers brushing across its edges. Claire smiled through the pain in her shoulder and something worse behind her ribs. "I want you to wear it. Always. It's to keep you safe. And to remind you..." She paused, breath catching. "Remind you that I'll come back when the time's right." Nayeli's lips quivered, but she didn't cry. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Claire's waist, careful not to touch the wound. Claire held her tight. A heartbeat later, she looked up at Akin. "I don't want to go." "I know," he said. Their eyes stayed locked. No one moved. "I still don't understand everything," she whispered, "but I know what was real." "You do." She wanted to touch him, kiss him, fall into the space between his arms and stay there. But there were men with guns behind her and people who still hated her beside him. The air didn't belong to either world now. "I'll carry this place with me," she said, "even when they try to wash it out of me. You won't forget." She blinked. "I'm scared I will." He stepped closer, then just enough that their shoulders brushed. "You won't." She reached out and took his hand. Rough, scarred, strong. "You told me once," she said, "that I had the ocean and you had the mountains." "I remember. I hate the ocean." He gave a soft, tired smile. "I know." She squeezed his hand one last time, then let go. They rode in a covered wagon toward the coast, the trail winding out of the forest and into open country. The mountains faded behind her like a dream she hadn't wanted to wake from. Claire didn't speak much on the journey. She kept one hand tucked inside her coat over her shoulder, over the scar. Fog drifted in low, hugging the ship rails and wooden docks. The ship waiting offshore was tall and iron-bellied, not like the kind a keen would know, not anything like a canoe or river raft. This one was made for oceans. Claire stood on the deck as they boarded, her coat wrapped tight, her eyes never leaving the dark silhouette of the mountains far behind them. She didn't speak. The wind caught her hair and lifted it back off her face. She let it. It was the same wind she'd heard in Akeen's stories, the same one that passed through the pine and whispered warnings and carried memories no one could quite name. It spoke now, too, not with words, but with the hush of parting. Atop the high ridge overlooking the valley and beyond to the sea, Akeen stood still, his figure wrapped in the white wolf fur coat his mother had made before the wars began. Nayeli stood beside him, smaller, her hand in his. The sun broke over the ridgeline, slow and solemn. Together they watched the ship move out, a line across the water, a shape fading with the light. Akeen lifted his arm, slowly, palm out. Nayeli did the same. The eagle pendant swayed at her neck, catching the new light. Its wings seemed to stretch wider in the wind. Above them, high and wide, a real eagle circled once, then again its cry echoing down the cliffs like a hymn. Nayeli leaned into her father's side. "Will she come back?" Akeen didn't answer right away, then said quiet, "One day." They stood a while longer. The ship grew smaller. The sky turned gold. And then Akeen spoke again, voice low, almost only for the wind to hear. "Little one, when you're grown, you'll understand. Love don't always stay. Sometimes it comes just to show us the way." Nayeli looked up at him, her eyes still full but no longer afraid. She held the eagle charm in her hand, closed her fingers around it. "I won't forget her." Akeen nodded, watching the line of sea and sky blend into one. "Neither will I." 2 years later. It was early spring again. The fog rolled in heavier than most mornings, curling through the lowlands and draping over the coast like a long-forgotten shawl. Seabirds called above the cliffs, and the river that once froze now ran clean and fast. The hills had greened and the first wildflowers poked through the cracks between stone. Akeen sat near the edge of the high ridge, sharpening a knife with an old river rock the same way his grandfather taught him. Nayeli, now taller and stronger, braided strips of leather into a sling nearby. Her eagle pendant still hung at her neck, worn smooth at the edges from her fingers. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. But when the wind shifted, they both lifted their heads. It came from the west off the water, and with it the faint sound of oars. Not paddles like theirs. Bigger, slower, steel striking wood. Nayeli squinted toward the horizon. "That's not a fishing boat," no, Akin said. His voice held something else, not alarm, not hope, just knowing. They stood. There, moving through the morning mist, a black-hulled ship crept along the edge of the bay, smaller than the last, no flag waving, just a steady shape against the gray. Akin narrowed his eyes, said nothing, but Nayeli gripped his hand without looking at him, and her other hand found the wooden eagle. He didn't squeeze back, but he didn't let go either. The wind carried the sound of something, maybe footsteps on deck or the creak of a gangplank being lowered, and then silence. Just the cry of an eagle again circling above the pines, like it remembered something. 2 years later, the mountains still lay quiet, as if they'd been holding still for 1,000 years. Winter had long since passed, leaving behind a soft coat of moss on the rocks and cool breezes whispering through the forest gaps. In the valley, wildflowers had returned to places once burned by fire, as if nothing truly disappeared, only moved elsewhere before finding its way back. Akin sat quietly outside the wooden lodge. The early morning light fell slanted across his face, deepening lines worn not by age alone, but by things he never gave names to. In his hand was a small piece of unfinished wood half-carved. He still whittled sometimes at dawn, not for any reason, just so his hands wouldn't forget the shape of things that once felt warm. Nayeli came running in from the tree line, her hair longer now, her eyes still sharp, though something had changed in the way she moved. She no longer ran the way children do. Now each step carried the memory of things most children never had to know. She stopped a few paces away, drew in a deep breath, then spoke softly. "Father." He looked up. Nayeli pointed toward the distant trail that led down to the valley. "There's a boat at the shore. It's her." Akin didn't ask who. He only held his daughter's gaze for a long moment, then rose to his feet, brushing the white wolf fur cloak over his shoulder. And he smiled. "And that is the end of the journey. If you're still here, thank you for walking this emotional path with me. This wasn't just a love story. It was a story about what it means to see another human being beyond fear, beyond blood, beyond the walls built by history." Claire and Akin came from two worlds raised to fear each other. And yet in the heart of winter, one chose to save a stranger, and the other chose to understand her supposed enemy. That's not romance, that's humanity. What moved me most was the silence between them, how much was said without words. And Nayeli, her innocence caught in the middle of grief, love, tradition, and change. It broke me. That little girl grew more than anyone in this story. There's something powerful here about choosing compassion over vengeance, about the strength it takes to not strike back. Akin could have walked away. He had every reason, but he didn't. And in that choice, he changed more than one life. He changed generations. This story reminds me that love doesn't always mean staying. Sometimes it means setting someone free or standing between them and the fire, even when the whole world tells you not to. So now I want to hear from you. What part of the story hit you hardest? Do you believe love like this can truly happen across cultures, through pain, through history? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'll be reading every single one. And if this story touched something deep inside you, Share it with someone. Let's keep these stories alive. Until next time, friends, stay kind, stay brave, and never stop listening to the wind.